every presidential election, there seems to be a conversation about the Electoral College. Usually, these conversations are about how the Electoral College should be abolished and removed from the Constitution. These conversations, however, aren't new. They've been around since before the Electoral College was created in the Constitutional Convention in 1787. So while the Electoral College is flawed and not a perfect system, it is still the best way to decide a presidential election. While researching this topic, I found evidence of the obvious that the Electoral College isn't popular. So then why is it still in place? Simple. An alternative still hasn't been found. My goal is to try to reinforce the belief that even with all its flaws, the Electoral College is still currently the best way to decide a presidential election. My first claim is that the Electoral College was created via a compromise due to northern and southern members of the Constitutional Convention not being able to come up with any other way to give each state an equal say in a presidential election. My first bit of evidence for that is with there being no government like it before, the framers of the Constitution had to make up a government from scratch in 1787. This was no different when the framers created the Electoral College. It was created to give each state an equal say in an election. Two groups didn't want the Electoral College to exist because they had a strong distrust of strong executives, which what they had before was the King of England. Ultimately, the Electoral College was agreed upon within the Great Compromise simply because they couldn't think of another way of doing it. My second bit of evidence is that the Electoral College is hard to get rid of because it would require 2/3 of Congress to change it through a new amendment, and then 3/4 of the states would have to approve that new amendment. That would mean 38 states would have to agree to abolish the Electoral College. The only time this scenario has ever happened was when Prohibition was repealed. So both the stats and example demonstrate that the Electoral College, for now, is still the best way to decide a presidential election. This shows that while the Electoral College isn't the perfect scenario, it may seem dated, an alternative has never emerged. My second claim is that the Electoral College has mostly reflected the popular vote. First bit of evidence for that is when the electoral voters cast their votes, they are supposed to cast a vote that represents the people that they are voting for. For the most part, this is followed, and when it isn't, the voter has to have a valid reason why they didn't vote what the people voted. Now, counterclaim to this is, according to the Pew Research Center in January 2020, 55% of Americans believe that the system should be changed, mainly because of the 2000 and 2016 election. My refutation to that is, while the system isn't the greatest, only 5 of our 59 elections have lost the popular vote, but won the Electoral College, which is 8.5% of the time that happens. This happened in 1824, 1876, 1888, 2000, and 2016. This means that 41 of our presidents were the winners of the popular votes, and 2 out of those 5 that lost the Electoral College but won the popular vote then went on to win the next presidential election they ran in. I hope that in this speech I've convinced you that while the Electoral College has been unpopular since its inception, it is still the best way to decide a presidential election. The framers of the Constitution were divided about it, but because of how much it takes to repeal an amendment, it will likely never be replaced. I also hope to show you that 91.5% of presidential elections the Electoral College has reflected the popular vote. In closing, I hope that I have broadened your understanding of the Electoral College and its impact on our presidential elections. While not perfect, it has shown that it has been successful all but 5 times out of 59.